Chapter 3. Another Puzzle. The following morning I rose quite early for me, my mind churning with the possibility of another outbreak of violence similar to the one that had claimed the heroic General Gordon. Holmes and I breakfasted together, but he was preoccupied, and experience cautioned me that it was useless to try to rouse him from his thoughts. The rain was still with us, and since I had no medical calls on my calendar, the Lancet claimed my attention for a time. I noted that my friend spent some time inspecting the golden dagger that had come our way the night before, and then, wearying of it, he crossed to the window to gaze at the dreary scene outside. The sheaf of cables that had been sent the previous evening meant that Holmes had initiated certain inquiries, and now, while awaiting responses, he was going over the matter of the departed agent, Crothers, the dagger, and the fears expressed by his brother. I rather hoped that he had plenty to think about, since, as readers of my words know, he was not of a patient nature. As my head rose to survey the silhouette of the great detective, it was immediately obvious that matters had taken an unexpected turn. His eyes, which had been viewing the outside scene in a moody manner, were now fastened on an area immediately below his vantage point, and his whipcord frame leaned forward slightly. On occasion he did bear a remarkable resemblance to a predatory bird about to swoop. Aha, Watson, what have we here? A carriage at the curb, a gentleman descending from it, for his clothes are of Savile Row. Eureka! He is hastening to our very door. Considering the state of the weather and the reluctant lack of traffic, I would say this indicates a matter requiring the attention of certain unique talents. That is the way you put it in those stories you write, is it not? I was prompted to remind him that those stories which he ofttimes accused me of foisting on a patient reading public were but recountings, devoid of form or content without his actions. But Holmes's eyes were sparkling, and he was rubbing his hands together like a gleeful money-lender. I did not wish to intrude on his happy anticipation, but my native practicality took hold. See here, Holmes, you do have that Mid-East matter to consider. Not until more information comes our way. Meanwhile, we have a man who has come through the rain on this wearisome day, and we cannot deny him an audience. Here we go again, I thought. Holmes, self-appointed protector of all in need on three continents, because he hated a wasted moment and his ego could not let him pass a puzzle by. While Billy announced our visitor and Holmes signified that he should be shown up, it occurred to me that my smug attitude would get a justified comeuppance if the man turned out to be a solicitor for church funds. But such was not the case. Mr. Clyde Deeds of Macewood, as he was announced, was well turned out indeed. From his loosened top hat and black frock coat, with white waistcoat down to his patent leather shoes. I noted as he deposited his hat and gloves on our occasional table while greeting Holmes that his hair was thinning. The flesh on his face was pale, even after braving the wind outside, but firm. He had a small moustache, somewhat military in its cut, as he seated himself in the basket chair indicated by Holmes. He brushed some droplets of moisture from his black satin cravat. The word foppish came to my mind, but the square cut of his shoulders with the suggestion of bunched muscles caused me to amend it to meticulous. I like to have such little observations at hand should Holmes ask my opinion, an infrequent occurrence. "There are cigars in the coal scuttle," said the consulting detective with a gesture of his hand. Deeds suppressed surprise at the eccentric arrangements in our quarters. I hoped Holmes would not secure shag from the Persian slipper. "Thank you. No, Mr. Holmes." He seemed ill at ease. "I feel most fortunate in finding you in your lodgings," he added lamely as his eyes questioningly swiveled towards me. "This is my associate, Dr. Watson. His discretion is beyond question, and he is quite indispensable to my investigations." While Holmes had used these words or similar ones many times through the years, they always prompted a glow of pride, though I had my own ideas as regards their truth. Suddenly a thought surprised me. Did Holmes really believe this? It was not apparent to me whether Dietz resented my presence or not. "We had a bit of unpleasantness at the family home last night. Macewood, you know." I didn't. Holmes gave no indication as to whether he shared my ignorance or not. There was an awkward pause. Then Deeds continued. "Felt some professional help was required, so I dashed over here first thing. Came right to the best, you see." I noted Holmes's eyebrows escalating slightly, and there was an air of mild amusement about him. "Not immediately to our door, Mr. Deeds. There is a smudge of dusty ash on your topper that is indigenous to our railway system, and surely I note a return ticket in your waistcoat pocket. Then there is some mud on your shoes, inevitable considering the weather, and judging by the color of the soil I would venture the guess that you went from the railway station to an address in the Hyde Park vicinity." Dietz's eyes had widened, and there was that look, half amazement and half apprehension, that I had seen so many times before. "Macewood is down Surrey way, Mr. Holmes, and I did toddle over to the home of my solicitor before coming here. I say, you are a bit of a crackerjack, are you not? Lawyer Simpson lives in Hyde Park for a fact. Old fellow thought I should contact the police, but the idea of a squad of constables descending on the menage didn't fill me with enthusiasm. Felt it you might be persuaded to lend a hand, things would be more discreet. Let us consider what this unpleasantness involves." I shuddered in my mind at what Holmes's reaction might be to a tale of domestic strife, but Deeds did better than that. "Fact is, Mr. Holmes, we got burgled, or jolly well we would have but for happy chance. Once started, our visitor swung into his tale with commendable alacrity, and he presented it with a minimum of extraneous verbiage, a fact that I knew weighed well with Holmes. Wife's up country visiting her sister, just me in the house along with the staff. Had planned on running over to the Turf Club for dinner and whist. A short distance from Macewood, the carriage horse threw a shoe, so we came back, you see, to hitch up another. Found I'd left my cigarettes, and while Alfred was changing horses, went back inside to locate my case. Rather fancy it. Lucky, you see. Turned a bullet once and saved my life. But that's another story. Anyway, I went upstairs with Dooley the butler on my heels. Old fellow brushed against a shield on the wall, and it fell with a fearful clatter. Then we heard another sound above and rushed up. We have an upstairs sitting room, used to be a sort of art gallery. Father was keen on oils. In any case, found the French windows wide open, rain blowing in. Someone had been there, all right, but not a sign of the beggar. Deeds paused for a breath and his delivery slowed down. It was then I gave him credit for more sense than I had previously. Now, I wouldn't be calling on Mr. Sherlock Holmes if that was the whole story. Fact is, can't figure out how the would-be robber got there. Considering the time between my leaving Macewood and my return, the blighter couldn't have been in my house more than 5 minutes. A spot sooner and Dooley and I might have seen him. Now, there's a balcony outside the gallery. French windows open onto it, but it's 30 feet from the ground, if it's an inch. Flat marble walls, Mr. Holmes, no handholds, and no convenient ivy, no tree close by either. At the beginning of Leeds's story, Holmes's mood had been one of concealed boredom, but his attention was caught now, and he regarded our visitor with that keen glance that indicated the gears of his mind were meshed and moving. You assume the uninvited visitor gained access to the balcony? Leeds had evidently anticipated this line of thought. There was no other way for him to enter the room. All of the downstairs windows at Macewood are barred. Doors were all locked and bolted. Dooley had checked them on my departure. If you would view the premises, I think you would agree with me that entry from the ground floor was impossible. You're the detective, but from where I sit, the thief had to gain access to the house via the balcony. For the life of me, I can't see how. He didn't use a ladder, for Dooley and I rushed right out, and there was no sign of anything like that. Actually, he continued after a thoughtful moment, how he got away so fast is as mystifying as how he entered. No sign of anyone, and yet we jolly well heard him while we were on the stairs. Chap just vanished. Well, Holmes said, and there was relish in his manner, you have presented an intriguing problem. A viewing of the scene is called for naturally, but first some questions that might cast light on the matter. Your burglar, if that is what he was, is evidently skilled. Premature assumptions are subject to error, but this does not seem like a common smash and grabber after the family plate. About the staff, how many in residence? Dooley, of course. We have a male cook, Frenchman, two inside maids. They all live in the main house. The gardener and grooms live by the stables and quarters. Alfred, our coachman, lives outside the well. Lives outside as well. Holmes rose and selected the straight pipe he sometimes fancied. With it, he crossed to the Persian slipper containing his shag. You mentioned flat marble walls. Our client's round and quite youthful face creased in a grin and he fingered his moustache. Fact is, Macewood's a bit of a fortress. Not by intent, just sort of happened that way. White marble all round, which is rather the style down our way. We have considerable grounds, but no trees close to the house. On a bright moonlit night, place looks like a Greek temple. Father, gone now, was something of an art fancier. He had the lower windows barred. Not that his collection was a famous one, just an idea he had, you see. Holmes is puffing out clouds of smoke, had an almost benign expression on his hawk-like face. The more our visitor made the entry of the burglar seem impossible, the better he liked the whole matter. At that moment I would have wagered 5 against 1 that he was thinking, "Aha, this may turn into a two-pipe problem after all." My friend leaned one arm against the mantel, peering down at Deeds, his eyes alight. Your very words lead us to what may be the key question. What was this elusive burglar after? Both of Deeds's hands turned palms up, as though disclaiming any knowledge whatsoever. There's the rub, Mr. Holmes. Oh, there's some pieces of value. One does collect things. But the wife's jewels, what she didn't take with her, are safely in the box at the County and Suburban. I kept a spot of currency on hand, but it's no great thing. Any articles of value he may have fancied would not have been easy to leave with. Furniture, tapestries, and such. There is the family plate, but it's rather heavy stuff and a man would have some trouble lugging enough to make it worth his while. No papers, documents, bonds? Queried Holmes. Some deeds, but nothing that is convertible. Deeds had another thought. Then there is this, Mr. Holmes. How's this chap going to get away with anything at all? He couldn't dump objects off the balcony. A bit noisy, to say the least. If he tried to get out via the ground floor, he could unbolt the doors all right, but it still takes a key to open them. That would present no problem to an accomplished swag man, replied Holmes. However, with 4 persons on the premises, to say nothing of the outside help, I agree that it would be a risky matter. "I'm sorry to be the squirrel with such a hard nut, Mr. Holmes," said our visitor apologetically. A faint smile teased the corners of Holmes's mouth. "If the solution was simple, you would have no need of me." Surprise infiltrated Deeds's eyes, to be replaced by the imp of humor. It crossed my mind that this outgoing type might well have a perspicacity that he took pains to conceal. "For a fact," he replied agreeably. Then came a sudden thought. "You don't suppose the rascal You don't think he came to the wrong house? A possibility, though I choose to ignore it for no concrete reason. Just mark it down to my feeling for such things. There was a considerable pause, as Holmes and Dietz as well mused on the matter. "What would you have me do?" queried the sleuth finally. "I assume, from your immediacy on the scene, that nothing was taken?" A negative shake of the head was his answer. "Then the tracing of stolen goods is ruled out. What we have is a burglar, assumed, whose plan is frustrated by your opportune return to the scene. Means of entry, and indeed exit, are unknown." My friend turned towards Deeds suddenly and employed a little trick I had seen him use before. "You realize, of course, that if he does not try again, there is little chance of ferreting him out." Our client, for I considered him as such now, nodded, and there was a seriousness about him. "I'm rather intrigued by puzzles myself. I want to know how this chap got in and got out, so I can make sure it doesn't happen again. I'm willing to pay, and pay well, for that information." Possibly he didn't feel this explanation was in sufficient detail, though it made sense to me. In any case, after a short pause, he continued: "I did mention the fortress aspects of Macewood. I guess I never considered it before, but it does provide a certain peace of mind, temporarily dispelled by last night's occurrence," said Holmes. "Your problem is intriguing enough for Watson and myself to come down to Surrey and look round. I assume it is raining as hard there as here, so our visit need not be made immediately. Any clues on the outside of the house have certainly been washed away." Dooley and I took a turn around the grounds with lamps at night, Mr. Holmes. Not with your expertise, of course. It was a quagmire. I fancy the fellow could have worn hobnail boots and no marks would have remained. Dietz' businesslike approach to the matter seemed to please Holmes. He returned to his favourite armchair and sat, his arms crossed in his lap, gazing at the man. There was another pause. "I wish," said Holmes rather grudgingly, "that there was some motive for your nocturnal visitor." "So do I, Mr. Holmes," Dietz said frankly, meeting the sleuth's intense eyes squarely. Holmes finally seemed satisfied. "All right, Mr. Dietz. We'll come down tomorrow. If the weather continues foul, no matter. Watson and I will be there." "For lunch, perhaps?" "Agreed. In the interim, I assume your household is on the alert?" Dietz's smile had an infectious quality. When I left, Gatson, our chef, was busy sharpening a rather alarming carving knife. The butler, Dooley, is an old Crimean man, and rather intrigued by the prospect of action. I noted several pokers were missing, so I suspect the housemaids are prepared as well. Macewood is a bit of an armed camp. "So much the better," commented Holmes casually. "But let's not have a poor delivery man set upon by mistake." On this lighter note, Clyde Deeds made his departure. I waited with some difficulty until his footfalls faded on the stairs. "Now, see here, Holmes," I exploded. "I know this presents an enticing pattern. Mysterious intruder with an obscure motive who seemingly materializes and then promptly vanishes. All the elements that you love so well. But there is that matter that Mycroft brought to your attention. And fate, Burlington Bertie bringing the dying man here, was what really got us involved. You're splitting hairs. The fact is that the Empire could be in difficulties." "True," he admitted. "Well, this case of the mysterious intruder seems a minor one that we may be able to dispose of in short order." This had to satisfy, and I turned to the word squares of the day. Those beguiling combinations had long ago presented a most nagging challenge, until I realized that I possessed a secret weapon. After a lengthy passage of time, Holmes broke in on my concentration. "You know, old fellow, relative to the Surrey matter, I cannot rid myself of the feeling that all has not been said. If the intruder made his entry and escape, a fact that we must assume, or there is no case, we shall find out how. What intrigues me no end is the why." "We certainly don't know that," I replied, my mind elsewhere. "But I'm not sure that the same can be said for Mr. Deeds. He seemed most cooperative. Unusually so. His recreation of the event was delightfully to the point. I could wish witnesses in court were as concise. But there is the question of his cigarette case." I lowered my paper. "You have lost me, Holmes." He went upstairs at the maze foot for his cigarette case that had once turned a bullet and saved his life. Now I just wonder, Watson, who fired the bullet.